setup here that will go around probably about 2 miles. So I'm going to say the Olson Custom Works tensioner is a complete success. This belt tensioner doesn't have to be used in a blower application. It will actually work just fine on a completely stock C5 Corvette or C6 Corvette for that matter. The only thing that would be different is you'll only use 6 of the 8 ribs on the tensioner pulley. But
Good afternoon, everybody. So here we are back working on the LSA Supercharged C5 Corvette. Had an interesting situation happen the other day. Coming home from work, passing a semi truck, getting on the freeway, just having a little bit of fun. I managed to pitch the belt off of this thing. And loosen the belt in rush hour traffic. That was not enjoyable. I was thankfully able to get a buddy of mine at work to come and rescue me. I was only about 5 minutes away from work, and we were able to get the belt put back on and get back on my way without getting us killed in traffic. The reason why that's a shock to me is I have about 10,000 miles on this combination with this blower, and it has never ever pitched the belt off of it. Not even come close. Not even, no hints, no belt damage. I've never shredded any belts. I've never had any belt problems. So why it decided this time to come off, I don't really know. Frustrating to say the least. So I made it home. I've never had any further occurrences. This happened like 2 weeks ago. And I've driven it a bunch of times since then. I've beat on it, and the belt's still on there. So regardless, I texted Jesse Olson. He's the one that does the machine work on the blower snout right here to make this capable of this blower being capable of being run on a C5 Corvette or a C6 Corvette for that matter. And I said, hey man, do you happen to know or recommend a heavy duty belt tensioner for your blower setup? And he literally texted me back within 2 minutes and said, we've got you covered. Go check out the website. So sure enough, I go check out the website, and they have a new heavy duty upgrade belt tensioner that is based off of a Cummins turbo diesel, I think it's a 12 valve industrial, maybe even the Dodge trucks, I don't know, but regardless, it's a 12 valve Cummins pretty heavy duty belt tensioner compared to the stock C5 Corvette. This is a Gates tensioner. His kit does not come with the tensioner. You have to buy the tensioner. It's a Gates 38518. You can see that right there. Here's the bracket. His bracket allows the tensioner to be clockable so that you can alter the clock angle of the tensioner. So that should help in dialing in belt length. So the new Gates tensioner comes delivered with a 8-rib non-shouldered pulley, and Olson Custom Works provides at an additional cost an optional, let me take this apart. He provides an optional 8-rib shouldered pulley for the tensioner, which this is an additional $50, I want to say, maybe $55. I went ahead and got it because I like the insurance of having shouldered tensioner pulley. This pulley doesn't come with a bearing, so you either have to buy a new bearing or go through the headache of pressing out this bearing and possibly damaging it, I just went ahead and bought a new bearing. It's a National 5106-WCC. You can get these on Amazon for like 20 bucks. I don't have a press here in my minuscule 2-car garage, so I did the old trick of... Oh, I still got my homemade grinder setup going on here, but anyways, I used my bench vise to press this bearing into this pulley, and then I fully seated the bearing into the pulley using an 1.5-inch diameter socket, always pressing on the outer race, never press on the inner race. You'll need a fairly large and robust set of snap ring pliers to install the snap ring in front of that bearing, so keep that in mind as well. You may be able to walk it in there and get it snapped in place without tools, but you're probably going to chew up the black anodizing quite a bit. So a couple things to note to install the optional pulley. This is the Gates washer that retains the pulley. This washer needs to be turned down in diameter 1/4 inch. That way the washer can fit down inside there. As it's delivered, it won't fit down inside there. Oh, the other thing on the tensioner, this edge right here, where it's about 1/4 inch wide, it needs to be sanded down approximately 1/16 inch. See if I can do this. So this little flange right here needs to be sanded down from this side about 1/16 inch going that way. And what that does is it provides clearance for the snap ring. The snap ring goes up against that surface. So the snap ring faces the radiator, front of the car. That's a better way to describe it. So we're ready to bolt this back together and torque it up. I'm going to put some Loctite back on this bolt. This is the Gates bolt. Also, key note, this is left-hand threads. So if you go to disassemble this tensioner to put your new pulley on there and you just go ripping on this thing with the impact, you're probably going to destroy that tensioner, and then you're going to have to buy another one or fix it with a helicoil. So keep that in mind. Backwards threads. There's notes about that in the instructions, so I was forewarned myself on that. This is the original 1997 stock as delivered belt tensioner, and I modified it to run an 8-rib Vortec pulley, tensioner pulley. It worked. Like I said, I never had any problems until a couple weeks ago, but you can run the OEM tensioner with a short 15mm wrench to lever that thing over to get the belt on and off. I'm pretty sure the Gates tensioner, you're going to utilize a 1/2-inch breaker bar to run this tensioner. Probably not a stubby little combination wrench. So I do suspect that this tensioner is going to provide much more security over that belt. I'm also curious to see that when this is on and clocked and it's in the right orientation, if it will allow an actual shorter belt to be used, but that's yet to be determined. There's no mention in the instructions on what belt to use in this configuration, so you're kind of on your own to figure that out. Oh, okay, I think I covered all the modifications that it takes to get the optional pulley on there. Another modification that I'm going to have to make. One of the other cool things about this heavy-duty tensioner is it comes with a brace that comes off of this hole right here, which is this tube, this aluminum tube right here. I'm gonna have to shorten this tube up the exact thickness of my Mighty Mouse race catch can bracket, so that it fits in there accordingly. So you may or may not have to deal with something like that when you go to put this on your car. You may not have a catch can at all. In that case, you wouldn't have to monkey with it. So that's enough rambling. Let's get to some more doing. I'm going to knock this belt off of here and unbolt the 2 bolts that hold the stock tensioner on, and then we'll go over putting the bracket together. Alright, here's a quick little size comparison of the stock C5 tensioner. It's pretty puny compared to the Cummins turbo diesel tensioner. I'd have to reckon that the spring inside of this drum is quite large compared to the spring inside of this guy. So anyways, we're ready to start configuring the bracket. So here is our bracket assembly, configured with the hardware in the orientation that it's going to be. So the 2 shorter bolts right here are going to go into the water pump ears, and you're going to use these spacers, the thin spacers, on the water pump ears. This is the spacer that I was talking about earlier that is going to go between the bracket and the cylinder head's going to be right here. I shortened this, the thickness of the bracket that holds my catch can. So I took approximately, for my installation, about 80 thousandths off of this bushing right here, or spacer. So my catch can bracket's going to go right here and get pinched between this spacer and the cylinder head. So I'm ready to stick this on after I take the bolt out of the catch can bracket, and then we'll move on to adapting the tensioner on there. I got the bracket installed. It is incredibly tight in here as far as filming goes. Let's see if I can get a little better shot here. Okay, there we go. Center of your screen is our new tensioner bracket. All 3 bolts are in place. You can see the bushing going back to the cylinder head. No problems with the length that I made to clear my thin bracket for the catch can. And like I said, if you don't have a catch can bolted to your cylinder head, you're going to be able to just bolt this thing right in, no problem. One thing that I am seeing that I didn't see mentioned in the instructions is there's an ear right here on the thermostat housing that I'm guessing I may have to cut off to make room for the tensioner. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't see that mentioned in the instructions anywhere. But such is life when you're working on aftermarket equipment and modified vehicles. So let me get that sorted out, and we'll get ready to bolt this tensioner in place. Well, here we are on day 2 of this here project. I don't really have that much time into it. Let's see if I can get the light held just right. I've got the stock. I have the belt on there that I was running with the stock tensioner, and it needs to be substantially shorter. The Cummins turbo diesel belt tensioner has an incredible amount of travel. The stock C5 tensioner probably has about 1.5 inches of throw. I would say that the tensioner for the Cummins turbo diesel tensioner has about 5+ inches of throw, believe it or not. So I ordered 2 belts. I got a 94.5 inch belt and a 94.8 inch belt coming. And keep in mind, if those belts come up a little bit short, which they shouldn't by my rough guesstimations, I can still reclock this thing this way and get even more ability to run an even shorter belt. In my opinion, the shorter the belt, the better. The shorter unsupported legs you can get, the better, so that the belt never has an ability to flap. Now, the next thing I noticed is, at least with the 100.5 inch belt on there, I don't know if it shows in the camera or not, but you can clearly see that this is out of alignment a little bit. The tensioner pulley is pointing this way. That's not the fault of the bracket. I'm gonna say that it is more the fault of the tensioner itself and the spring-loaded part of the mechanism. But I am going to take the time to shim that bracket until this pulley is perfectly in line with the blower pulley and the crank pulley. Whatever it takes in stack-ups of washers and shimming to make that happen, I will make happen. So that's where we're at right now. My new belts should be here within the next half an hour. So that's another thing I wanted to advise people on, is you're gonna need belts for a custom application like this, and don't just expect to be able to get them at your local parts store. So you may have some downtime waiting for belts. Also, I highly recommend you get these belts on Amazon. Not that they're the end-all be-all, but if you try and buy these 8-rib heavy-duty belts from a local auto parts store, they're going to cost you over double. So like $100+ for a belt. I get these belts off of Amazon for like 50 bucks. So keep that in mind. Let's move on. Got a couple of little updates to touch on. We got the bracket back in place. I ended up switching over to washers up against the water pump. I've got 2 washers inboard and then 3 washers outboard to give it a little bit of a wedge. And then I refit the bushing. Very, very difficult to see that bushing down in there. About right in the center of the camera view, behind that hose clamp, is the spacer. But we are ready to put the tensioner back on and see how our alignment is now. I took the tensioner bolt and I cut about 3/8 of an inch off of the tensioner bolt so that it is not so long-winded to put on. You don't have to run the nut so far. Another thing I ended up doing was I took this junk parts store 17mm wrench and I ground a flat in it. You need to do this to get up against that spacer, the long spacer for this nut right here. I couldn't find any other way to get that nut tight on the back side of the bracket, because of the brackets right here, and then you're going to be holding this guy behind it with the spacer right here. Then you can get it good and tight. According to the instructions, you can over tighten this to the point where the tensioner will bind up. That kind of surprises me a little bit, because this solid bushing in here should keep that from happening, but we'll cross that bridge as we get to it. Like I said, we're ready to put this back together and see what we got. Well, with a little bit of persuasion, I got the 94.8 inch belt is what I ended up using on there. And the tensioner is laid almost all the way over in the preloaded direction. It's so much shorter. So we're 5, almost 6 inches shorter on the belt. The longest run anywhere with the belt being unsupported is from the crank to the tensioner. And it looks so much different because there's so much less belt. The alignment is pretty damn good. I'd say the alignment is probably within a half a washer. So I'm going to run that and we're going to see what's going to happen. But yeah, we're ready to take this out and road test it, flog it a little bit, and see if we can get the belt to come off of this thing. I am very optimistic though that there is going to be no further problems with this here installation. Super excited. Love it. Alright, we're going to crack this thing off for the first time with the new belt, new tensioner setup. So if it flies off of there, you'll be the first ones to see it. Cold start, car's been sitting for a week or two. I just loaded a different tune onto it, so don't mind the wonky kind of weird start. Well, it looks like the belt's tracking well. Pretty happy with that. Let's go for a ride. We've got a little loop set up here that will go around probably about 2 miles. So I leave the traction control on. It's only about 38 degrees outside. So far so good though. All right, the belt is still on and the belt's tracking completely perfectly. So I'm going to say the Olson Kustom Works tensioner is a complete success. So that's about all I got for this one. If you guys have any questions on the tensioner install, by all means put them down in the comments below, and I always get to every single comment that I can get to. So yeah, awesome, very excited.